Hey guys, what is up? It is the Fast Break Report here, bringing you guys another vlog. So I want to talk about free agency and the end of the season. The NBA season is getting to an end here, where the Eastern Conference is fucking wild. The Eastern Conference is a toss-up from 4 to 7 over the next 2 or 3 games remaining in the season for all the teams involved. Like, this is, we're literally looking at a situation where the Cleveland Cavaliers are currently the 4th seed. If they lose 3 games in a row, they can end up being the fucking 7th seed. Okay, like, that's where we're at in the Eastern Conference. It has been a long time since the Eastern Conference has been that competitive. The Western Conference is way more solidified at the moment than the East, but it makes the Eastern Conference games a whole lot more fun to watch than the Western Conference games. I just will say that. Like, you know, all the teams in the East that are playing, it's fun to watch at the moment. I've never been this excited about playoffs in a very long time. So it's pretty cool to see that, you know, that the league is just competitive in the Eastern Conference again. I never thought I'd see the day the Knicks are the fucking 3rd seed, but here we are. But I want to talk about a guy that I've talked about on the channel before this year, because I've got Paul George derangement syndrome, and I just enjoy talking about Paul George because I want to see Paul George back in Indy so bad, but I don't think that's really going to happen. I mean, I'd say we went from a 2% chance that Paul George ends up in Indy to more like a 25% chance. And the reason I say that is because if you've been watching the Clippers this year, they have fallen apart. I'm just going to call it what it is. This team has fallen apart. They traded for James Harden. They acquired PJ Tucker, who, by the way, is not even fucking playing for them anymore, it seems. I honestly think PJ Tucker's going to retire. He's not getting any burn for the Clippers. Ty Lue doesn't seem to even care about fucking playing him. James Harden's been in a slump the whole second half of this year, it seems, since the All-Star break. Paul George feels disrespected. And rightfully so. I'm just going to call it what it is. Paul George feels disrespected. They paid Kawhi Leonard. They made sure Kawhi Leonard got paid. But the problem is now, you know, you've got 2 star players in Paul George and James Harden, where it's very obvious Paul George is the better player. Like, yes, James Harden might be your facilitator, but Paul George wants his money if he's going to stay there, and James Harden wants his money if he's going to stay there, but James Harden is simply not the same player that Paul George is. Okay, Paul George is clearly the better player. Even James Harden's scoring has fallen off a fucking cliff. The Clippers' defense as a whole, as a team, has fallen off a fucking cliff. They are a team that is just a clusterfuck right now. It is a dumpster fire for the Clippers. Now, there's a lot of people who say, oh, well, Paul George isn't going to stay, or Paul George is going to stay. All they have to do is pay him the money he wants. And you're probably right. Like, I'm going to call it what it is. You're probably right. However, with that being said, I think Paul George wants to win a ring too. Paul George, if he can get paid and win a ring, okay, I think he's going to try to do that. Now, Paul George, while easily, I think, being the biggest name in unrestricted free agency this offseason, is, I think, going to weigh his options before he makes any commitment to any team. I'm just going to call it what it is. I have a feeling Paul George is going to be one of those dudes who waits and sees what happens in the Eastern Conference, because obviously the Pacers are probably losing Jalen Smith. They got a lot of guys that are leaving. Oscar Tshiebwe is going to be back. Like, even if he is a G League player, Oscar Tshiebwe is going to be a guy who I think gets a deal. But this is a team in the Indiana Pacers that he loves Tyrese Halliburton, right? He's been on PG's podcast more than any other fucking player, and all they talk about is Indy. Like, that's all they talk about. Like, he loves the culture in Indy. He loves the idea that it's like, you know, there's no fucking around. You show up on time. You know, like, they fine players for, like, not showing up to, like, massages and workouts and shit, like, a minute late. Like, if you're late, you get, like, a $20,000 fine or some crazy shit like that. Or, you know, like, all I know is Indy is fucking military, and Paul George seems to like that about Indy. And you get to be a part of a team that has the best bench unit in the league. TJ McConnell's fucking balling his ass off. You got him next year. Isaiah Jackson has shown a lot of improvement this year. Ben Mathurin's going to be coming back with a fucking vengeance. Like, at least for Paul George, if you go to Indy, like, you know you're going to have a shot. Pascal Siakam's going to get paid. But, you know, there is a possibility that if, you know, I'm going to throw this out there, and people are going to say I'm fucking crazy, but I'm going to tell you, okay, I'm not fucking crazy. Tyrese Halliburton going to talk to our man Spicy P. Okay, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you right now what's going to happen, okay? Because Tyrese Halliburton going to do some recruiting, and Pascal Siakam is going to be doing that recruiting with him, okay? They might get on a flight and head to Los Angeles, California, and go to Paul George's house. Or they might both end up on Paul George's podcast, okay? And they might, off camera, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like, hey, you should come to Indy. My boy Spicy P over here said he'd maybe take less money if you were to join us and make a serious championship run with us. However, there is another team in the Eastern Conference that could entice Paul George. And that team is the Philadelphia 76ers. The Philadelphia 76ers are in a very, very unique position. And the reason I say that is because pretty much everybody on their fucking roster is gone, except for Paul Reed, who's a decent player, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, who we all know is going to get the fucking bag, and some other no-name dude named Jeff Dodal Jr. or some shit like that. But other than that, everybody on that roster is up for grabs. Kelly Oubre, Nicholas Batum, Robert Covington, okay, Shake Milton, all these guys, okay? Now, if you're Paul George, your best friend right now is Father Time. Your best friend right now is Father Time. And the reason I say that is because even though he's 33, he's still a damn good basketball player. He might not be what he used to be, but he might have lost half a step, but that half a step ain't crazy noticeable when you watch Paul George play ball. I'm just going to call it what it is. Like, Indy is one 3-and-D wing away from being a top 3 seed in the East. And I firmly believe if it's not top 3, it's at least top 5. And if the Pacers would have just won some of those fucking rinky-dink below 500 basketball games this year, they lost 14 of them to teams that have a record below 500, more than any other playoff team. Had they just won like half of those fucking games, you're looking at a 50-win team. And you like the narrative that comes with it, Indy gets their golden boy back, so to speak, in Paul George and all this other stuff. But Philadelphia has the ability to go out there and literally completely construct a team around 3 or 4 players, right? We all know Tyrese Maxey is going to get paid, but Tyrese Maxey, being a young dude, I don't think it's crazy to say that Philadelphia could say, we're going to extend you, but we're not going to give you $200 million. We're going to give you, I don't know, 140, 150, right? Over 4 or 5 years. And that's going to come with the stipulation that we're going to sign Paul George. And I'm just going to say it, okay? If you're Paul George, that is a very enticing offer. If you're Paul George, right? Joel Embiid, perennial MVP candidate, right? Tyrese Maxey is a young, he's an all-star on the fucking rise, okay? Like, he's a perennial all-star on the rise. He's very, very young. You get to go there and be the third piece, and you get to basically have a team completely constructed around. Now, how much cap space you're going to have is beyond me at that point, because Paul George is going to have to get paid too. But it's just the idea, like, if you're Philly, you could maybe put something really, really nice around that. And while I understand the new CBA makes it very hard to have 3 max contract players on your roster, somehow Boston is getting away with it. I don't know how, but I don't think they have 3 max contracts, but they have 2 guys with 2 astronomical fucking contracts. And they just extended Drew Holiday today to like $135 million. So they got Drew Holiday until he's 38 now. But it's just the idea, like, Boston is a team that has managed to find a way. Like, they've got 8 dudes on their team, and everybody else is going to be vet minimum deals. Like, right now, I'm just telling you right now, they've got Al Horford, Porzingis, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. They can't afford to sign any big names in free agency. Like, what Boston's got now is what they're fucking stuck with. But if you're looking at a team like the Pacers, if you're looking at a team like the Philadelphia 76ers, suddenly you look at that and you're like, okay, like, let me just wait and see how this pans out for both of these teams. Because I honestly feel like Paul George is going to go to one of those 2 teams. And no matter what you want to say about Joel Embiid, last year he won the MVP, right? And I felt like he shouldn't have. This year, Jokic is going to win the MVP, even though I feel like he probably shouldn't have, considering last year. Like, Joel Embiid's such a weird case because last year I didn't think he should have won it. And this year, I think he should have won it. You know, it's one of those things where it's like Jokic and Embiid kind of just swapped MVPs, but for the wrong years. Like, Jokic should have won it last year, Embiid should have won it this year, and instead, it's like this. So, all I'm saying is, man, Paul George is a guy to watch in free agency. Because honestly, even though the Clippers are going to have cap space, I feel like Paul George feels more like, I just feel like Paul George feels too disrespected to want to go back. I like, something's going on in that locker room that I feel like we're not hearing about. And because, like, honestly, like, the whole team is kind of falling apart. Like, I'm just going to call it what it is. Like, the Clippers' whole team is not what it used to be, you know? And if you're Paul George, you have to weigh the options here, right? Even though Paul George is a very injury-prone player, it's like, do you want to go play for a team where if Kawhi Leonard is injured, you basically have no fucking shot, right? Where you could go to the East, play in an easier conference, you could play with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, or you could play with Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam, and he fucking loves Tyrese Halliburton. And the Pacers have the best bench unit in the fucking league. So those are the toss-ups. It's like, do you want to get your money and play for the 76ers, or do you want to take less money and play with essentially one of your friends? You know what I'm saying? Now, I will say this, when it comes to Indy versus Philly, I do think Philly has the upper hand at this point, simply from a monetary aspect. But, you know, like I said, you could go to Philly and they could just put a dog shit bench around you. I don't think that's going to happen with Daryl Morey, but it's just the idea, like, we've went from about a 2% chance that Paul George joins the Pacers to about, I don't know, I want to say a 25% chance. I really think he's going to sign with the 76ers. I don't think they're going to bring back Tobias Harris. I honestly don't even think they're going to bring back Buddy Hield, okay? But it's just the idea, Paul, like, the Philadelphia 76ers are going to have a lot of fucking cap space, and they could make something special happen. And I think if Daryl Morey does get Paul George and he can convince Tyrese Maxey to just take, you know, a little bit less money than maybe he's actually worth, actually, I can't even say a lot, maybe a whole lot less, like maybe you know, $60 million less. Okay, instead, like, Jalen Brunson's contract is one of those things that we looked at and we're like, maybe that's an overpay. Now you could say Jalen Brunson was worth every fucking dollar he gets. But Tyrese Maxey's one of those guys where it's like, you know, it's going to be hard to convince him to take less money, considering he's a young guy and he would like to set himself up for life, I'm sure. But you never know. To some young players, you know, Tyrese Maxey's one of those guys that I think wants to win a whole lot more than he wants to get paid. So, I don't know. Philly's a very, very enticing destination for Paul George, and so is Indy. So, I don't know, man. We'll have to wait and see. But all I'm saying is, Paul George is easily going to be the biggest available free agent, I think, this offseason, unless something happens where LeBron just decides he's not going back to the Lakers or anything like that, which I don't think is going to happen. But it's definitely interesting. It's definitely an interesting situation, because I will say this. I think Paul George is... I would say there's like a 90% chance Paul George is done with the Clippers, unless they provide him some crazy astronomical promises that are just simply, like, unattainable. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh yeah, we're gonna sign you to this max deal. You and Kawhi are gonna be our two guys. We're gonna bring back Harden for fucking pennies on the dollar, and we're gonna put a team around you, my guy. Trust me. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna put a team around you. Like that. We're gonna get the fucking Steve Ballmer treatment, and I just don't think that's gonna happen. I think Paul George is done with the Clippers. I think Paul George is done trying with the Clippers. You know, there's only so many times you can go to the playoffs and fucking lose or not make it at all before you decide it's time to try something else. And I think Paul George is definitely going to want to try something else. So tell me what you guys think about this down below in the comment section below. A like helps me out. Subscribe if you guys want to see more on the Fast Break Report. And I'm out of this motherfucker. Peace, guys.